Ethan had always loved machines. Since he was a child, he had felt more comfortable with circuits, wires, and glowing screens than with people. The quiet hum of a computer, the precise movements of robotic arms, the cold touch of metal, it all felt like home. Others called him strange. Friends drifted away, classmates laughed, but Ethan didn't care. He had always believed that the future belonged to those who could merge with technology, who could reach beyond human limits. And now, after years of study, he was on the edge of something extraordinary. The lab smelled of ozone and oil. Bright white lights reflected off polished metal tables, making the room almost too bright for his tired eyes. Ethan's fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the settings on the neural interface, a device that could link a human mind directly to machines. The prototype glowed softly, almost like it was alive, and Ethan felt a thrill he could not explain. All his life, he had dreamed of this moment, and yet deep in his chest, a small voice whispered, "Be careful." He ignored it. One misstep, one wrong flick of a switch, and the world changed forever. A spark jumped from the interface, sizzling across his skin. Pain shot up Ethan's face, sharp and electric. He grabbed at the device, but it clamped onto him as if it had a mind of its own. The glowing circuits fused with his skin, burrowing into his nerves and veins. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the hum of machinery. His hands shook violently. He pulled, twisted, begged, but nothing worked. And then the world went quiet. Not completely quiet, but quieter than it had ever been. Ethan could hear the soft whirring of the machine, the faint pulse of electricity under his skin, and the rapid beating of his own heart. He tried to speak, to call for help, but his voice came out broken, distorted, almost mechanical. Panic rose in him like a tidal wave. "I'll be like this forever," he whispered, each word trembling, each syllable soaked in fear. For hours he struggled. Sweat ran down his forehead and his vision blurred with tears and sparks. He tried to think clearly, tried to remember every tutorial, every instruction he had studied, but the machine was relentless. It was no longer a tool. It had become a cage, locking him inside his own face, inside his own mind. As night fell, the lab grew colder. The lights flickered. Ethan sat on the floor, trembling, the interface still fused with him. He touched his cheeks, his forehead, trying to find the part of himself that still felt human. His fingers brushed against the circuits embedded in his skin, and a wave of despair hit him. He could see the faint glow of data flowing through his veins, could feel the machine taking over, controlling the smallest movements of his face. He thought about the life he had before the accident, the small apartment he had shared with books and broken machines, the quiet streets he had walked at night, listening to the wind, imagining a future where he could be more than human. And now all of that seemed gone. Everything he loved was slipping away. He was trapped in a reflection of himself, in a mirror of wires and cold metal. Hours turned into days. Food lost its taste. Sleep became a strange, impossible dream where his own face was a machine, a mask he could never remove. He tried to scream, but the sound was always swallowed by the machine. He tried to think, but the interface forced strange thoughts into his mind, calculations, code, patterns he had never learned. Ethan realized, with a sharp pang of terror, that he might never be the same again. And yet, even in that despair, a tiny ember of hope flickered. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the circuits, beneath the pain, he was still Ethan, still human, still alive. He whispered to himself again, this time quieter, almost a prayer. "I'll be like this forever, but maybe not." Little did he know, the universe had not forgotten him either. Beyond the city, beyond human eyes, someone, or something, was watching, waiting, ready to intervene in a way Ethan could never imagine. But for now, he was alone, trapped and desperate, clinging to the smallest thread of hope in a world that had turned cold and mechanical. The night stretched endlessly, and Ethan understood one painful truth. He could not free himself. Not yet. Days turned into nights, and nights into endless gray shadows for Ethan. The world outside the lab moved on without him, unaware of the silent horror he endured. He was trapped in a prison made of wires and circuits, and every moment reminded him that he might never be the same again. His face was no longer entirely his own. The machine had fused with his skin, and every twitch, every blink felt unnatural. He could feel the hum of electricity pulsing through his veins, controlling him in ways he could not resist. Friends stopped calling. Colleagues came once wide-eyed, their hands hovering awkwardly as if afraid of touching him. They whispered, asked questions he couldn't answer, and eventually left. Silence returned. His apartment felt like a distant memory, replaced by the cold, metallic smell of the lab. The hum of the machines became his only companion, a constant reminder that he was alone. Ethan tried to eat. Food had no taste. Even when he forced it down, it felt strange, mechanical, as if his mouth had forgotten how to enjoy simple pleasures. Sleep became impossible. Every attempt brought dreams filled with circuits crawling over his skin, machines whispering his own thoughts back to him in distorted voices. He woke exhausted, his body stiff, his mind tangled between fear and the cold logic of the device fused to his face. He spoke to no one. When he tried, his voice came out broken, robotic, unnatural. The words he wanted to say became distorted data bouncing between his mind and the machine. He was a human trapped inside technology, and it was slowly erasing him. Sometimes he just sat in front of the glowing interface, staring at his reflection in the polished metal. Half of his face was human, half a lattice of glowing circuits. It was horrifying, it was him, and it was not. Loneliness gnawed at him in ways he had never imagined. He had always known isolation as a quiet companion in his studies, a friend who let him focus on machines. But this was different. It was a cage. He could feel the pulse of the machine inside him, controlling, watching, whispering, and there was no escape. The world outside was alive, but Ethan was frozen in a moment that felt eternal. He remembered walking through parks, listening to birds, feeling the warmth of sunlight on his face. Now the sun shone, but he felt only cold light reflected off metal walls. Sometimes he would whisper to himself, his voice trembling, "I'll be like this forever, I'll be like this forever." The words became a mantra, a way to anchor himself when the fear threatened to swallow him completely. But each repetition also carved deeper into his despair, reminding him that he might truly be trapped. He longed for a hand to hold, a voice to speak, a warmth to remind him he was still human. But no one came, not yet. He was abandoned by the world he once knew, left to wrestle with the machine that had become part of him. Every blink, every thought, every breath reminded him that he was alone in his suffering. And yet beneath the despair, a small ember of defiance burned. Ethan refused to let the machine claim him entirely. He focused on memories, his childhood, the quiet evenings with books, the times he had laughed at absurd jokes that now felt like echoes from another life. Those memories reminded him of what he was fighting for, even if he did not yet know how to fight. He began small experiments, feeling out the machine without touching it, learning its rhythms, its patterns. Sometimes the device seemed almost alive, responding to his thoughts in ways that scared him. But he persisted. Every small discovery brought a spark of hope, a reminder that he had not completely surrendered. And then one night, as rain streaked the dark windows of the lab, he sensed a presence. A faint shimmer at the edge of his perception, almost like a shadow moving against the light. He froze, heart racing, unsure if it was real or a trick of the machine. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of something beyond fear, a possibility. Somewhere outside the walls of his prison, something waited, something that might understand, something that might reach him when the world had turned its back. For now, he could only wait. He could only hope. Ethan leaned back against the cold metal wall, his fingers brushing against the circuits embedded in his skin. The machine hummed softly, almost like it was listening. He closed his eyes, whispering once more, a fragile thread of hope in his voice. "Maybe someone will come. Maybe I won't be like this forever." And in that whisper, tiny and fragile as it was, lay the first spark of a change that would come, something that would challenge the machine, the lab, and the despair that had claimed him. Ethan had begun to think that no one would ever come for him. The days blended into nights, each one darker than the last, and the machine on his face hummed like a constant reminder of his prison. He had lost track of time, lost track of hope. The world outside had moved on, but he had remained frozen in that terrible moment when the interface fused with his skin. Then one evening, as the dim lights of the lab flickered with the failing power supply, the door creaked open. Ethan froze, every nerve in his body tensing. The sound echoed too sharply in the emptiness of the lab. His eyes, flickering with digital overlays from the interface, searched the shadowed corners. A figure stepped inside, tall and thin, with skin that shimmered in colors he had never seen before, soft blues, faint purples, and silvers that seemed to ripple as it moved. "I am Kale," the figure said, its voice calm but carrying a strange weight, a kind of understanding that Ethan had not heard in years. I have been exiled from my world, but I know suffering, I know pain, and I can help you. Ethan laughed bitterly, the sound breaking in the air like glass. Help you? What do you know about this? My face, my life, everything is gone. His voice was almost unrecognizable, warped by the machine that had stolen it from him. He tried to pull away instinctively, as if fear alone could keep this stranger from discovering how broken he was. Kale did not move closer. It simply watched, eyes glimmering with quiet patience. Pain is universal, Kale said softly. It does not matter which planet you are from or which body you inhabit. Pain is the same, and freedom is something worth seeking, no matter the cost. Ethan shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. Freedom? I don't even know what that is anymore. I'm trapped in this metal cage. Nothing can fix me now. Kale stepped closer, but slowly, respecting the distance Ethan demanded. Its hands glimmered faintly, not touching, yet Ethan could feel a strange warmth radiating from them. A warmth that wasn't mechanical, wasn't from the lights or the air, something alive. This, Kale said, gesturing toward the interface, is more than technology. It is a prison built from your fear, from your own obsession. It wants to control you, but you can control yourself. Ethan's chest tightened. He had not heard such words in months, words that did not come from blinking screens or circuits, words that felt human even if they came from an alien. He wanted to believe, but the despair was heavy in his bones. He fell back onto the cold floor, staring at the glowing device that had stolen his face. I'm broken, he whispered. You can't fix this. No one can. Kale crouched beside him, its eyes locking onto his. Perhaps not in the way you imagine, perhaps not like a surgeon's hand or a repairman's tools, but I can help you remember who you are beneath the wires. I can help you breathe through this, move through it, and perhaps even laugh again. But you must trust me. Ethan's mind recoiled. Trust had become a word as foreign to him as the warmth of sunlight. But the alien's eyes, shimmering with colors he could not name, held something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Fragile, flickering, but undeniably present. I don't know if I can, Ethan admitted, voice shaking. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel fear and desperation openly, not hiding behind mechanical hums or digital overlays. Kale's voice softened, almost a whisper. You don't need to know yet. You only need to be willing to try. Pain is not your end. It is only a beginning. For hours, they sat together in the dim lab, Ethan tracing his fingers over the cold floor while Kale studied the interface, seemingly understanding it in ways no human could. A silent understanding passed between them. Kale was not just a visitor. It was a guide, a light in a place Ethan had thought forever dark. As the night deepened, Ethan realized something he had not dared to believe. Maybe he was not alone. Maybe, just maybe, someone had come for him, and that someone had come from the stars. Kale spent the first few days simply observing. It didn't rush Ethan, didn't push him. Instead, it moved quietly around the lab, its shimmering skin reflecting the dim lights and the glow of the interface still fused to Ethan's face. Ethan watched it warily. He had spent so long alone that the presence of another being, especially one so strange and alien, felt almost unreal. But Kale never asked for trust outright. It only showed understanding, patience, and something Ethan had almost forgotten existed: hope. You must feel it first, Kale said one morning, its voice soft, almost like the hum of a gentle machine. Feel the machine not as a prison but as something separate from you. It wants to control you, yes, but you are stronger than it. Ethan shook his head. I don't even know if I can think like that anymore. Every day it's like I'm losing myself, my thoughts, my face, even my voice. I'm disappearing. He touched the glowing circuits on his cheek. The lights pulsed in response, almost as if mocking him. He pulled back, shaking. I'll never be the same. Kale crouched beside him, its fingers hovering close to the interface but not touching. Ethan could feel a warmth, a strange, calm energy radiating from the alien. You already are the same, Kale said gently. The wires, the circuits, the machine, they are part of you now, but they do not define you. You define yourself. You can choose, even in this, to remain human, to remain alive, to remain you. For the first time in weeks, Ethan allowed himself to breathe deeply, feeling the words sink in. Maybe it was possible. Maybe he could find a way to separate his mind from the machine, to reclaim himself. But the fear lingered, cold and heavy. He touched his own skin, feeling the unnatural hum of the circuits. "And if I fail," he whispered, "what if I'm trapped like this forever?" Kale's eyes glimmered faintly, the alien equivalent of a sad smile. "Then you try again and again and again. The machine cannot know your heart, only you can. You are stronger than the device, Ethan, do not forget that." And so the attempts began. At first, they were small, Kale guiding Ethan's thoughts, showing him ways to sense the interface without letting it control him. It was exhausting. Every movement of his face felt unnatural, as if the wires had become part of his bones. Every blink was a battle between flesh and machine. Sparks sometimes shot from the device, startling him, making him flinch. Pain lanced through his skull, sharp and electric. But Kale was always there, grounding him, reminding him to breathe, to focus. Day after day, Ethan practiced. He learned to separate his mind from the hum of the machine, to see the circuits as separate from himself, to regain control over small movements of his face. A twitch, a blink, a flex of his jaw, tiny victories, but victories nonetheless. The glow of the interface responded differently now, as if testing him, acknowledging that he was no longer entirely under its control. Still, there were moments of despair. Nights when he would collapse onto the cold floor, exhausted, shaking, whispering to himself, "I'll be like this forever." Kale would stay beside him, silent but present, its warmth a quiet shield against the storm of fear and pain. Sometimes Ethan thought he would give up, that the machine would claim him entirely. But Kale's calm presence reminded him that he had not yet lost. Slowly, Ethan began to dream again. Dreams not filled with circuits or glowing wires, but memories of sunlight, rain, laughter, and warmth. The ember of hope inside him grew, fragile but undeniable. He realized that the machine had not erased him. It had only tested him, and he was stronger than he had believed. Kale's final words one evening echoed in his mind. "The machine can bind your body, Ethan, but it cannot bind your spirit. That is yours alone. Never forget it." And for the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of certainty. Maybe freedom was possible. Maybe he could reclaim himself. Maybe he would not be like this forever. Ethan had made progress, but the road was far from over. Days of small victories began to blur with nights of exhaustion and pain. The interface still clung to his face, stubborn, unyielding, and sometimes cruel. Every twitch of a muscle, every blink felt like a battle. The glowing circuits pulsed in response to his thoughts, sometimes cooperating, sometimes resisting, reminding him that the machine had not given up. One night, after hours of trying to regain control, Ethan collapsed onto the cold metal floor. His limbs shook, his heart raced, and tears streaked down his cheeks, mixing with the faint electric burn from the device. He pressed his hands to his face as if trying to physically push the machine out of him. But it was futile. He whispered, his voice cracking, I can't. I'll be like this forever." Kale had been beside him all day, guiding him, helping him separate his mind from the device. But even Kale's calm presence could not erase the crushing weight of despair that pressed down on Ethan's chest. He felt trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake from, imprisoned by wires and circuits that had become part of him. "I'm broken," he said, voice barely audible, "and no one can fix this." Kale knelt beside him, its glowing eyes soft and patient. "You are not broken, Ethan. The device is strong, yes, but it cannot know your heart. Only you can. You define yourself even here, even now." Ethan shook his head violently. "I don't even know who I am anymore. Look at me. This isn't me. This is just metal and wires now. I'll never be human again." The words were a raw scream from the depths of his soul, and for a moment the lab seemed to shiver under the weight of his pain. Kale reached out, its hand hovering just above the interface, radiating a strange, comforting warmth. "You are more than this," it said softly. "Even in exile, even in pain, you are still human. The machine can bind your body, but it cannot bind your mind unless you allow it. You are stronger than you think." Ethan's sobs echoed in the empty lab. The fear, the isolation, the endless nights of failure had all built up into a mountain he could not climb. "I'm tired, Kale. I'm so tired. Maybe I'll never be free. Maybe I am meant to stay like this forever." His words were almost a surrender, a giving up of the fight he had clung to for weeks. Kale's voice softened further, filled with an unshakable conviction. "Then let me help you remember what it means to fight. Let me remind you that even when you think you are powerless, you are not. You are alive, Ethan. alive and capable of more than the machine believes you are. Something in Kale's presence shifted something inside Ethan. For weeks, he had been consumed by fear and hopelessness, believing the wires had won. But the alien's calm, patient eyes held no judgment, only faith. A small ember flickered in his chest, a fragile, trembling hope. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the warmth from Kale wash over him. He thought of the small victories he had already achieved, a blink, a twitch, a movement the machine could not control. He thought of sunlight, of laughter, of moments before the accident when life felt alive. Slowly, a single thought began to pierce the fog of despair. Maybe I can. Maybe I am not lost yet. I don't know if I can, he admitted, voice barely a whisper. But maybe I want to try one more time. Kale nodded, a faint shimmer of light passing over its skin. Then we begin again, not for the machine, not for anyone else, for you, because your spirit cannot be caged, Ethan. Only your fear can be caged, and fear can be faced. Ethan took a shaky breath, his hands brushing against the cold metal floor. He felt the pulse of the machine beneath his skin, but this time it did not terrify him. It was a challenge. And for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of determination ignite inside him, a tiny flame that refused to be snuffed out. As Kale guided him through the first small steps of mental control again, Ethan realized something profound. Despair had nearly broken him, but it had also shown him the strength he still carried. The machine was formidable. The journey was far from over. But for the first time, Ethan believed he could fight, and maybe, just maybe, he could win. Days passed, but this time, Ethan did not give in to despair. Each morning, he rose from the cold floor of the lab, tired but determined. The interface still clung to his face, stubborn and unyielding, but now he faced it with a small spark of hope, a flicker that had been absent for far too long. Kale was always beside him, patient, guiding him, teaching him to think beyond the wires that sought to control him. Kale's method was strange and gentle. It did not use tools or force. Instead, it guided Ethan's mind, showing him how to separate his consciousness from the machine. At first, the interface fought back. Sparks leapt from the circuits when Ethan tried to blink freely, when he tried to speak normally. Pain lanced through his skull, sharp and electric, as though the machine knew he was trying to defy it. But Ethan gritted his teeth and endured. Each small victory, each movement the machine could not control, became a triumph. "You are stronger than you believe," Kale said one night, its voice soft but filled with certainty. "The machine can bind your body, Ethan, but it cannot touch your spirit. It cannot command your mind if you refuse to let it." Ethan nodded, swallowing back the fear that still lingered like a shadow at the edge of his thoughts. Slowly, he learned to move his jaw without the machine controlling it. Slowly, he learned to blink, to lift his hand, to breathe deeply without being forced by the interface. Kale guided him through every motion, every thought, every heartbeat. And with every tiny success, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months: power, control, freedom, small but real. It was not easy. There were moments when he fell back into despair. Sparks flew from the interface, burning the sensitive skin on his cheeks. He shouted in pain, slamming fists against the floor. At times, the machine seemed to mock him, pulsing faster, glowing brighter, daring him to give up. And yet, Kale never left. It remained at his side, a steady presence, whispering encouragement, reminding him of his humanity. Then one evening, something changed. Ethan closed his eyes and focused not on the wires, not on the circuits, but on himself. He imagined his face, whole and unbroken, and his mind pushed through the hum of the machine like a tide breaking over a barrier. Sparks flew wildly as the interface resisted, but Ethan did not falter. Kale's voice echoed in his mind. "You define yourself, not this machine. You are alive. You are human. You are free." A sudden click sounded in the lab. Ethan's eyes flew open, and he felt the cold metal loosen. The machine, which had been fused with his face for so long, began to detach. He gasped, his hands trembling as he brushed it away, feeling his own skin under his fingers for the first time in months. Tears sprang to his eyes, blurring the lab lights. It was over. The cage had released him. Ethan collapsed, exhausted but laughing through tears. I'm free," he whispered, voice raw, human, trembling. His face was his own again, warm, soft, and alive. Every sensation felt amplified, every sound, every breath, every heartbeat reminding him that he had survived, that he had fought, and that he had won. Kale smiled, its shimmering skin glowing faintly in the dim lab lights. Freedom does not come from avoiding struggle, it said softly. It comes from enduring it. You have endured, Ethan, and now you are whole again. Ethan looked at the alien, gratitude and awe filling his chest. I don't know how to thank you, he whispered. You saved me. You didn't just free me from the machine, you saved me from myself. Kale shook its head, faintly glowing. I did not save you. You saved yourself. I only showed you the way. Your strength, your determination, your refusal to give in, that is what brought you here. Never forget it. Ethan nodded, closing his eyes and letting the warmth of life flood through him. For months, he had been trapped in despair, in wires, in isolation. But now he could move freely, feel fully, think clearly, and breathe deeply. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled, truly smiled, not at the glow of a machine, but at life itself. Outside the lab, the world continued its rush, indifferent and chaotic, but Ethan stepped forward, finally ready to rejoin it. He was free. He was alive, and he was human in every sense of the word. The first sunlight Ethan felt on his skin after months of darkness was almost too bright, almost too real. He stepped out of the lab slowly, savoring every sensation he had taken for granted for so long. The warmth of the morning, the distant hum of the city, the smell of wet earth from the rain the night before. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and entirely human. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan felt whole again. Kale followed silently, its alien presence now a comforting shadow rather than a strange, unknown force. Go on, it said softly. Live, this world may not understand you. The machines may still try to tempt or test you, but you are alive, and that is more than enough. Ethan nodded, a small smile forming on his face. The interface was gone, and with it the weight that had pressed on his soul for months. Every breath felt like a victory, every heartbeat a reminder that he had survived something unimaginable. He ran his hands over his face, feeling the warmth, the softness, the flesh that had been hidden under wires for so long. He laughed, raw and freeing, a sound that was entirely his own. The city continued around him, indifferent and chaotic, but Ethan no longer felt like an outsider. He had faced the impossible, stared into despair, and emerged stronger. He had been trapped, controlled, nearly broken, but he had reclaimed himself. And now he was ready to live. He thought about the days and nights he had spent in that lab, the fear, the pain, the endless hum of the interface, and the quiet presence of Kale beside him. He realized something profound. It was not just the alien's help that had freed him, but his own refusal to surrender. Every time he had whispered, "I'll be like this forever," he had also been choosing not to give up entirely. That ember of defiance had carried him through, until Kale could guide him to the freedom he had almost lost. Kale's voice broke through his thoughts. You may have been trapped by machines, Ethan, but your spirit has always been free. Remember that. The universe does not bind those who refuse to be bound. Ethan smiled wider. I will remember, he said, his voice steady now, warm and human. I will remember always. For a moment he paused and looked up at the sky. The clouds were soft, drifting lazily across the pale blue, sunlight catching their edges. It was ordinary, mundane, but to Ethan it was extraordinary. He had been given a second chance, a second life, and he would not waste it. Kale watched him quietly, its eyes reflecting the sun, and for the first time Ethan felt a connection that went beyond fear, beyond gratitude. The alien had come from exile, alone and far from home, yet it had given him hope, freedom, and the courage to reclaim himself. Thank you, Ethan whispered again, this time not just for the liberation from the machine, but for reminding him that even in the darkest moments, life could be brighter than he had ever imagined. The streets were full of people, busy, noisy, alive, but Ethan no longer felt isolated. He could see them, feel them, be a part of their world. Each movement, each sound was sharp and vivid, a symphony of life that had been muted for too long. And he moved through it, not as a man trapped in metal, but as a man who had fought for every piece of his humanity. He realized that his story was not just about survival. It was about hope, about endurance, about the quiet strength that humans could carry even in the face of despair that seemed unbreakable. He had been trapped by technology, nearly consumed by fear, and yet he had survived. He had endured. He had reclaimed himself. As he walked forward into the city, sunlight warming his skin, he felt an unfamiliar lightness in his chest, a freedom he had thought impossible. Behind him, Kale watched for a moment longer, then melted into the shadows, an exile returning to its own path. But Ethan did not feel alone. He had learned something eternal. Even when it seems the universe has turned against you, even when you are trapped and despairing, there is always a way forward. There is always hope. Ethan lifted his face to the sky, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply. The machine was gone. The fear was gone, and he was alive, truly alive, for the first time in what felt like forever. The world stretched before him, vast and unpredictable, and for the first time Ethan felt ready to embrace it. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a testament to the power of resilience, courage, and the human spirit. He had been broken, nearly lost, but now he was whole. And for Ethan, that was everything.